This video covers WellSeeker Pro's daily reporting functionality. The daily reporting functions within WellSeeker Pro are made up around four main dialogues. We've got the inventory, the drill string editor, the daily report, and the slide sheet. Off of these four main dialogues, we have various other dialogues and functionality associated with daily reporting, but these are the main building blocks. In the scope of this video, we're going to cover starting up a job. In that vein, we've provided some training material. We have a database, which I currently have open. Once you've saved that database that came with this video to a location, go File, select Database, and select the database in question. Hit Open, and you'll have it open and ready to go. In addition, we've also provided an Excel document with data set in it, so that you don't have to create it off the top of your head. We've just got some stuff that you can copy and paste in to make it a bit easier for you. If the database and the data set that I'm pulling in don't match what you've got, don't worry, it just means the stuff that you've got has been updated since this video was made. First things first, I'm going to expand my database tree, and in our example database, we'll be interested in the actual wellbore. If I open up the properties, the one that says actual wellbore properties. All daily reporting stems from the actual wellbore. There are some dialogues that are associated with other levels, but the actual daily reporting, BHAs, and inventory are associated with an actual wellbore level. Which makes sense really, because you only actually report when you're physically drilling. When you start a job, you will have had a number of scenarios to get here. You would have been provided information by your well planning department, which you've either had to manually input to get to this stage where you've got an actual wellbore and a survey, or you could have had a WellSeeker Pro export file that you've imported, or a Compass export file that you've imported to get to this stage. The fourth option is if your company's running a server database, you could have used the remote data fetch function to pull down this information. Regardless of how you've got there, to start a job you need an actual wellbore and a survey in place. The daily reporting functionality are made up of various different dialogues which are associated with different levels of the database tree. i.e., if I select different levels of the database tree, in this case operator, different options for opening dialogues become available. Without getting too into it, probably the easiest way to approach accessing all of these things is to select the actual wellbore that you're going to be creating daily reporting for, right-clicking, going to Reporting, and opening up the daily reporting dialog. You can also left-click your actual wellbore and select the daily reporting dialog icon from the toolbar. If this toolbar isn't visible, right-click in the grey space and make sure the reporting toolbar is checked. Okay, so select your actual wellbore, open up the daily reporting dialog. So from within the daily reporting dialog, there are a load of toolbar icons here, and these will allow you to open various different levels and dialogues that have daily reporting functionality associated with them. The first things we need to check are that there are three sets of codes that we need to build upon for our daily reporting. These codes are the activity codes, the phase codes, and the cost codes. Depending on how you imported the information or whether you manually input it, you may already have this information here, but you should check this at the start of every job to make sure that you've got this going forward. So the first one are the activity codes. Within the activity codes, this will be what your own company is set up as their default activity codes. You should make sure these fall in line with what your organisation wants to use. The activity code is used in our daily reporting, and this helps the software assign specific tasks and events to depths and time related sequences within your daily reporting. Not only does that help with your daily reports themselves, but when the job is over, the well statistics and key performance indicators will feed off of these daily activities and the activity codes associated with those. So it's important we get these accurate for the big data purposes going forward. You can have these available within your activity codes table, but not visible from drop-downs when you use them in the daily activities by deselecting the active box. So if it's not got a tick mark in it, it won't be visible in drop-down menus, but you're not deleting it from the table by doing that. The codes that need to be in place for the functionality of the daily reporting to work are 2J and 2K, being slide drilling and rotary drilling. We also need to have 6O and 6P in there as pick up BHA and lay down BHA. Other codes to note are any code prefixed with an 8 will be noted down as rig NPT codes, and any codes prefixed with 26 are drilling related NPT codes. Once you're happy with your activity codes, hit apply and close. Got to go back to the daily reports dialog, and the next set of codes we need to verify are the phase codes. These phase codes are purely well statistics and KPI related, i.e. they will assign certain depth and time events and performance criteria to analytics tools. It's important that you get these input correctly as well, because this will affect the big data, i.e. if you have bad data input, you'll get bad data output at the end of it. Again, these will be organisation specific. Make sure you have these input as your organisation require. The final set of codes are the cost codes. These are effectively what give the user in the daily reports, when they're doing their daily costs or field costs, these are the options that are available from the drop-down list. So any costs that could be associated on a day ticket want to be included here. These might have already been included in the export file that you've received from your well planner. If not, you have to manually input these from whatever material you've got. If your company's running a server, you can update from the server. If you hit update from remote, you can also export cost codes or import cost codes to a file, so that in between jobs you can easily pull in a long list of costs. You don't have to manually input them each time. One point to note, when they're getting cost codes that have been pulled in from a bid sheet, these might include currency symbols or thousands separators. If these are included, it means that the daily costs will not work because the software doesn't know how to read these currency symbols. So ensure that the data that you have is purely a value without thousand separators, i.e. commas, or currency symbols in them. So those are the three costs we need to check before we start inputting any data. And they are the building blocks on which we will work around our daily activity and our daily costs. Something else we check before we go ahead, which is less critical, if we go to Tools and we go to Personnel, Names and Details. Within here, if your company is running a server database and you've pulled down the information, you should have a full list of all the field personnel available. It's not imperative to fill this. All it does is it creates drop-down menus will be populated with this information when you're selecting who's on site on a particular day. In the same vein, if you go to Tools and Rig Names, this table may or may not be populated based upon pulling information down from the server or not. And again, this just populates a drop-down list when you're selecting the rig name. Those 5 dialogues are effectively the things we check before we do anything else. Codes, personnel names, rig names. Once you've covered that, the first thing to input is the inventory, i.e. you've arrived at site, what tools do you have there? The reason why we input the inventory first is because once you've input things into the inventory and the details of those, you can then take things from your inventory and include them in a BHA. So we're getting this in at one stage, and hopefully it will avoid duplication of input when we come to our drill string editor. The inventory dialog is where we specify what equipment we have on location and the status of that, as well as some critical information about it. The information that we can input is the serial number, the description, type, which is available from a predefined listing, OD, ID and length of the component, as well as the top and bottom connections, again selectable from a predefined listing. If it's contained in a basket on location, you can put in the basket serial number and where on location it is, as well as the weight, the date on location and the date off location if applicable. Then we have some checkboxes for items to specify whether they're on location, whether they've failed, ready for backload, in hole, and then beyond that we have comments, make, model, and whether it's dirty or clean. If unchecked, it's not been used downhole. If checked, it's dirty, it's been used downhole and covered in mud. So we have a couple of ways you can input data into these. You can select from the catalogue, which opens up the component catalogue. You can then filter this for specific components and dimensions. Select one of them and insert it into your inventory. Okay, so very quickly you can get in a lot of information and fill in the remainder. And then check the relevant items in the checkboxes. As you can see, these are color-coded depending on what you have checked. So if it's on location, it just remains white. If it's failed, it turns red. If it's ready for backload, it turns blue. And if it's in hole, it turns green. There's no color coding for dirty or clean. The other way, other than using the component catalog, I'm just going to delete this, is to manually type these in, or you can copy and paste. So I'm going to do that now. We have an Excel dataset sheet that comes with this database and the video. So I'm just going to open up the inventory tab in that data sheet. I'm going to Control C. And I'm going to paste. You can now see we've pulled in a large amount of inventory data from an Excel sheet. And we can see that everything is on location and clean, i.e. it's not been run downhole yet. Within the inventory dialog, as well as the catalogue for importing information in, we also have, you can select the colours for the different checkboxes. You can show all components, MWD only component types, DD only component types, and we can also include MWD status columns in there as well, depending on what view you want. Okay, I'm going to show all components. You can also filter at the bottom here by filter by off location and filter by on location. Within the dialog, you can also print an Excel copy or a PDF copy of the inventory. If your company is using the asset management functionality within WellSeeker Pro and the workshop have exported the tools to this particular job, you can also add them to the inventory using the Receive Tools dialog. In this case, we're not using the asset management system, and as such, no tools have been found pushed to the well. But that is how you would receive tools from your R&M facility. Now going to save the changes we've made and close the inventory. So once you've got your inventory in place, the next thing to go to is input your BHA. In order to do this, we go into the drill string editor. Again, the easiest way to do this is go back to the Daily Reports dialog and select this icon from the toolbar. In order to add a BHA, currently we can't add anything, and that's because there isn't a BHA in existence yet. we need to select Add New BHA, this green plus icon, and that then allows us to add BHA information. Within the drill string editor, the first things you will input are the description, rig, BHA number and MWD number, as well as the mud weight, before you put in anything else. So in this case, I'll change the description to surface. The rig is Patterson 142 in this instance, BHA number 1, MWD number 1, and the mud weight in this case will be 8.3. Doesn't matter if you don't have this in straight away, this one's just for reporting purposes, but you do want your surface or your description, your BHA and MWD number in as soon as possible. The next thing to note is that we're going to go ahead and build our BHA here, and we always start with the bit. So you don't start with drill pipe and then work down to the bit, you always start with the drill bit as the first component type. You can either manually input the information here, or again you can right click, insert from catalogue, much like we did with the inventory. It opens up the component catalogue, and you can then filter based upon different sizes and select an applicable bit that you're after. Which then pulls in some data already for you. The alternative to that is you can just delete this row. You can select drill bit and then insert from the inventory. Now if you've got any components in your inventory with component type drill bit, it will pull up a list of any components that have that same component type. If you leave the component type blank and insert from inventory, then it will pull up your whole inventory that has a selectable type in there. Okay, so again, this is why we fill out the inventory first and then go to the drill string editor to build up our BHA, because it allows you to pull information from your inventory into the BHA very quickly. Again, I have a data set within the Excel document provided with this course that I'm just going to pull a lot of information from. So I'm just going to grab, copy and paste from the Excel table, select a drill bit first of all, and Control V or paste in my BHA. You can see that's pulled information straight across. For each row there are component properties. So for example, I have the first row selected here, which is the bit. Based upon the component type in this cell, it dictates the structure of the component properties here. So for drill bit, we have this set of component properties. For a stabilizer, we have a different set of component properties. And for an MWD/LWD tool type, we have considerably more component properties. So we're going to go ahead and fill in the component properties for every single one of these rows, starting off at the bit. I'm going to use the data set in the Excel document that I've got as a guide for this. But again, you can use whatever you like. I'm going to use connection type from the drop-down list. Put in tensile yield and torsional yield. Select the bit type, the grade in, and a grade out. However, obviously we haven't picked this BHA up yet, so there is no grade out. For the bit gradings, we have in the edit menu here, we've got an option, use IDC bit grading. If you check that option, when you select on one of these cells, there is a 3-dot icon appears. If you select that, it opens up the bit grading dialog. And this then prompts you to fill in based upon the IDC codes for your bit gradings. This is beneficial in the fact that this is obviously a fixed nomenclature and you can't get typos mucking up your bit gradings. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and unselect that again. If it's unselected, you can manually type in whatever you like into the grade in and grade out cells. You input the grade gauge OD, and much like for the grade in, grade out, there is a 3-dot icon in the TFA cell that's always here. If you left click on that, it will open up the bit hydraulics dialog. Within the bit hydraulics dialog, you can either input a fixed TFA when this checkbox is selected. If it's unselected, you can input the quantity of jets and the jet sizes. Once you've input those values as well, you can input flow, mud weight and bit size, and it will calculate your bit hydraulics for you. Again, this is just for your reference. It doesn't actually do anything other than give you information. So I'm going to input fixed TFA of 0.84 and hit apply. Now we can see the TFA cell has been filled in with what we had in the bit hydraulics. You can input bit formation index if you have it, bit number, drilling hours, and circulating hours we won't have yet because we haven't drilled anything, but you can input the make and the model. Okay, so you get the idea. For each of these rows, there are a series of component properties that need to be input. I'm going to pause my video recording right now, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in all the remaining rows from the data set provided with the training. And we'll come back and discuss the other ones once they're filled in. Right, I've taken the time to fill in the component properties for each of these rows, and you can see they've been filled in now with the scenario that we haven't picked up the BHA yet. So anything that's pertinent to pick up time, lay down time, those are not filled in at this stage. Okay, the ones that take a bit of time to fill in are anything that's MWD, LWD, or motor. They have generally larger component details than other items such as dumb iron, crossovers, filter subs, collars. Something to be aware of is in the MLWD component type within the component properties for the subcomponents of that individual tool, the pulsars, gammas, survey probes, for example. If you have a component type set as pulsar within the inventory, that then becomes available from the drop-down list within the pulsar serial number cell. Okay, same applies for your drivers, your batteries, your directional probes, and other such items. Again, another reason to fill in the inventory prior to filling out the BHA. The next things we're going to go ahead and fill out are the sections at the bottom here. So depth in, we are starting at surface, 0. Depth out, we don't know yet because we haven't started drilling. We are going to be picking up on our simulated day here, which is 2019. It's in July and it's the 1st of July 2019. Don't be confused, I'm running a UK calendar, so that's why it's 0107 as opposed to 0701, and the data I'm going to make the same as well for now. And we'll update this later on once we've actually started drilling. Hit save. The formation details, this is your target formation for the entire well, not just for this specific BHA. So in our data set, we've got formation 7 as the target formation. During the filling out of these details, there are a few options that you need to be made aware of. Obviously, in the edit section, we've already covered use IADC bit grading. If we go to the catalogue section, these checkboxes here directly affect whether certain items are drop-down options or whether you can just manually type in what you like. So for example, for the connection details here, connection top and bottom, if you have this checked, there'll be a drop-down menu to select the connections from. If not, you can type in manually what you like. Same for the bit, make, the motor make, motor lobes and bend angle options, as well as stages. So if you are having trouble finding one in a list, you can uncheck it and manually type in the data. If you need to make a report before you start drilling as well, if you go to File, you can select Print BHA Excel or to PDF. If you don't want it displayed from bit to drill pipe, then you could print the inverted XL, which puts the bit at the bottom of the printout. Right, once we're happy with the BHA that we're going to pick up, we can then move on to the next step. So save and close. We're now going to go back to our daily reporting dialog and start fleshing this out with information before we start the drilling process. So right now we've got in all our well data, we've got in our codes, personnel and rig details in the drop-down menus, we've got in our inventory, we've got in a BHA that we're going to pick up. So within this section, again, I'm going to refer to the Excel document, the DDR1 tab, and we're going to input some information here. So our report date is 2019. First of the 7th. Okay, you can see here this is updated. So within our daily reporting dialog, there's a few options we need to be made aware of before we start cracking on. If we go into reporting options, we've got the date format. So currently I've got the date format that we're going to view is month, day, year. The alternative is day, month, year. Also, location can be USA, Canada, or rest of world, and this affects the counties and states dialogues that we have available to us. So I've already input the date in my UK format. It's converted it to the US format based upon my date format selection, and report number 1. On top of this, I'm going to want to select my well status. Is currently we're on location, but we haven't started drilling yet, so we are on standby. You'd select the DD coordinator, and this comes from your personnel list that we filled in earlier, and your MWD coordinator if relevant. Again, this comes from the personnel list. Once you've filled in that section, go to well data and personnel. This opens up the well data and personnel dialog, and we want to fill this in with as much information as possible. Effectively, we want to fill this out once, and this information will be carried over between daily report to daily report, and we should only come back and change anything in this where relevant. So I'm going to, within my DDR1 tab on my data set, I've already got the information here that I'm going to type in. You can see that some of this information's already been filled in. This has been pulled from the drill string editor, and this has been pulled in from the drill string editor as well. This has come from the well seeker database tree. So again, manually type in this information. The state and county, these are selected from the drop-down lists. So in this case, I'm in Texas, and it's Karnes County. So casing shoe, we actually have a 20-inch conductor in place, and that is at 100 foot, and the OD is 20 inches. Casing weight, we don't have any information for, so we're going to leave that blank. Target formations come from the drill string editor, and then we've got a series of company information that we can pull in here. We also want to fill in the personnel information. So I'm going to take that from my, again, from the data set that I've got. And this I can copy and paste in. Effectively, the personnel section tells the software when people are coming on and off shift in their various different roles. So for example, we've got the day and night directional drillers, day and night MWD hands. And this would indicate a 12 till 12 rotation. If, however, the crew were doing a 6 till 6 rotation, and we had 0600 to 1800, and we had the night person doing the midnight till 6 AM and 6 PM till midnight. The way you would input that is in this vein. Effectively what that means is it looks like the person does 24 hours, but in reality they do one day, and they do 0 to 600 and then 1800 to 2400 hours. i.e. that is the time they come on during that day, and that is the time they leave during that day. If at any point in the well you get a relief for one of these personnel, then of course you can input a new person coming on. So in this case the relief would be the name of that person and the time that they came on to relieve the individual. Okay, so that indicates the one hour of handover. But effectively you had 2 day directional drillers on the ticket on that particular day, with example 3 changing out for Mike Kramer. Mike Kramer would then leave the site entirely, and the following day example 3 would be the day DD for the entirety of that shift. So that is how you'd carry out crew changes within the personnel section. Let's go ahead and delete these. I've just added, and leave the rest of this information as was. Hit apply, and go back to my daily reports dialog. Once we've filled in the well status and personnel details, we also will look at the daily costs. So you remember earlier we filled in our cost codes, and I told you this would make a drop-down option populated with these values for the daily costs. Well, now we're going to go utilise that. If you select this black dollar symbol, this will open up the daily costs menu. This applies to the costs that you are charging the client, or the costs incurred on that one particular day. So this is updated on a day-by-day basis. And again, within our data set, we've got an example, we've got directional services operating, because when we pick up, we will be in whole, and you select a quantity. You'll notice that what we've got in the drop-down menu was what we had in the cost codes. Okay, you can also assign these costs to a particular BHA. So again, the drop-down menu is based upon what you have in your drill string editor dialog. So this directional services and the motor service are all associated costs with BHA 1. And there is one of them applied that particular day. If you look at the bottom here, you've got the option to have the serial number drop down, or whether you just type it in individually. And then you have a well total and a daily total value based upon what's been included in this daily cost and previous daily costs. Once I've hit apply, you can see the well total updates to our current daily value. So if you had the same cost the following day of 20,000, the daily cost for the following day would be 20,000 and the well cost total would be 40,000. So those are the daily costs, and that's how we can track our field ticket values on a day-by-day basis from within the daily reports dialog. Another feature accessed from within the daily reports that we can fill in before we start drilling is the pipe tally, and that is accessed from this T symbol on the toolbar here. So much like the drill string editor, we need to add a tally in order to be able to edit it and create one. So again, in the data set, I have an example tally, pipe tally 1. I'm going to put in the description of BHA-1. My BHA length, 118.88. The stick up refers to the stick up above the rotary table or Kelly bushing, whatever your depth reference is, of the drill pipe to the connection when you're making a survey. The survey offset gamma offset if applicable, and the number of joints per stand. I'll show you what that does in a short time. I'm then going to copy and paste all of the individual drill pipe lengths from my Excel document and paste them into the pipe tally. You can see here that the joints per stand, they build up the picture of 1 stand, 2 stand, 3 stand. If I put it down to 2, again, based upon doubles, it will create stand 1 at the end of the first 2 singles. If I put in 1, again, it counts them up. So you can see here the stick up plus the survey offset will give us our survey depth based upon that particular point. Yep. And these are rounded to the nearest foot. So 67 plus 3 is 70, 150 minus 70, that will be your survey depth based upon your stick up during connections. Once you have created your pipe tally, you can then go ahead and print it by hitting the print button, and this will output it to Excel format. Once you're happy, hit apply and close. Another function within the daily reports dialog is the mud chemicals inventory. Again, this isn't of interest to most directional companies, but for operators, this is a useful tool to input. Effectively, you can input your product types, the units, the cost, how much is on stock initially, and then once you've been inputting information into this inventory, you can print it off, and based upon a daily update of your mud chemical usage on a day-by-day basis, this will then either add if you've received a quantity on that day, or subtract from your inventory based upon a product type if you've used any mud chemicals on that particular day. And that's all tracked in the background, and that information is logged on the company man's report available within the daily reporting section. Again, majority of people not interested, but to operators or mud companies, a useful little tool. The next thing we'll fill in is as much information as we can before we pick up our BHA. So the 24-hour summary, we don't know what's happening yet. We'd normally fill this in at midnight and complete this all off. Same with the rotary table hours, that gets calculated. Any comments from the day, you'd normally do at midnight when the report is finished. Fluids information we can fill in manually, normally done at midnight off of the mud report. So we'll leave that blank for now. And the drilling parameters I'll show you later. We won't actually fill this in manually at all. We will use our slide sheet data to populate that. So at this stage, the daily activity is the only thing that we really need to pull in manually at this stage. And so we've arrived on location, and we are from 0000, i.e. midnight, to 1 o'clock in the morning. Our start depth of 0. And we have no BHA in hole. Our phase is currently standby. And the activity during that time is they're skidding the rig into position. And what this activity section does, this makes up the bulk of the time and depth breakdown description in your daily reports. So that's why we fill this in. The BHA, phase and activity, these are important so that those time and depth breakdown moments can get attributed to a specific BHA, a specific phase, and the activities are associated with time and depth as well. Now, as well as being important for your daily reporting breakdown, this is also highly important for data analytics going down the road, whether that be for this one well in the well statistics dialog, or as a large pool of data analytics within the KPI data analytics functionality in the software. So vitally important you get these selected correctly throughout the entire well. Once you've filled in your first line, you'll see a second row is automatically created for you. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and we've picked up our BHA. It's taken us an hour, and we have picked up BHA1. Once you are into a specific phase change, you go ahead and select that phase. So we are now in the surface phase of activity, and our activity is 60 pickup BHA. Now remember, we set up our activity codes at the start of the well. These are what are populated in the drop-down menu that I was just showing you there. And any items in this list with this code description and an active checkbox will be visible in the drop-down menu. If you don't want to see them, uncheck them from the active checkbox and they won't be visible in the drop-down menu. Okay, so this is where this list populates from, the activity codes table. So we're picking up our BHA, which is code 60. Again, a very important code, 60 and 6P for pickup and lay down, that these are used correctly because the software uses these codes to track the start and end of BHAs in your performance data. So vitally important you use those at the start and the end of a BHA. Put in the description for the purposes of your report. Okay, and then we are going to not trip in hole because we're drilling from surface. So effectively, once we've picked up BHA, we're straight into drilling phase. So that is us fundamentally set up to a stage where we would start drilling realistically. Inventory, drill string editor, daily reports. You can minimize the daily reports dialog, and that is then selectable from your toolbar in your computer desktop. So we've now covered how to set up a job in daily reporting. We've effectively got a starting stage in the WellSeeker database tree where we have an actual well bore and a survey created for us by the well planning department, and we have a database containing that information. We then set about verifying or entering the activity, phase and cost codes. We checked the personnel and rig details. We then went on and input information into our inventory dialog, moved on to the drill string editor and input our BHA information for our first BHA. We then went to the data reports, input the basic information within the report for the date. We went to the well and personnel details section and input that data, as well as any daily cost information that we already had. Then we filled in as much of the daily activity section as we could prior to picking up the BHA. And that effectively is the process you would go through to start up a job prior to picking up your assembly. This is the first part of a two-part video setup, so continue on to watch part 2 of this video where we'll cover inputting information as the job goes on and rounding up to an end of well report stage. Now we're going to go on and look at some questions and an exercise to get you to this stage. Okay, this is the questions and answers stage. For all the questions, I'm going to read them out. If you don't know the answer immediately, pause the video before the answer is read out, obviously, and go back and refer to the video to find out the answer if you can't recall. Okay, so first question, what is the recommended sequence of data entry for the daily reporting job setup? And the answer is we input the codes first, i.e. activity, phase and cost codes, and we check that personnel and rig names have been input within their data tables. We then move on to the inventory, the drill string editor, daily reporting dialog, and within that daily reporting dialog we update the well status, the coordinator details. In the well and personnel details dialog we update as much information as possible as well as the crew shift information. We then move on to the daily costs and input the daily activities, and if applicable we also input the pipe tally. Next question, what activity codes are essential to include in the daily activities section for each BHA? So 60 and 6P, which are the pickup BHA and lay down BHA codes, These are essential for pinpointing the start and end of each BHA within the software. These must both be included for correct picking of start and end time for BHAs. In addition to that, you should also include the 2J and 2K, the slide and rotate drilling codes if there are any drilling activities. And also codes to be aware of are the codes starting with 8, which result in rig MPT, and codes starting in 26, which result in drilling MPT related activities. Next question. Why is it important to select the correct BHA, phase and activity in the daily activity section? The answer, these details affect the daily reports, well statistics and key performance indicator data. So effectively they affect all the important results of the daily activity section. So really critical that you have the correct BHA selected, correct phase and the correct activity code. Next question, what symbols should I not include in the cost code values? So we did cover this, and the answer is any currency symbols and thousands separators, i.e. commas within the numbers. Effectively all you're looking for is a string of numbers without any other symbols involved at all. Moving on to the exercise. Okay, so effectively in the exercise I want you to do what I did and understand the process as you do it. So download and then open the provided database file and also the dataset file which we provided in Excel format. Once you have both of those open, so obviously the database you'll have open in WellSeeker, check and update the activity, phase and cost codes, as I did. Check and update the personnel and rig names. Then move on to the inventory. Then onto the drill string editor. Then move into the daily reporting dialog and update the well status, coordinator details, well and personnel details, daily costs, pipe tally, and as much of the daily activity as is available from the dataset. During this process, please ensure that you have a tinker around with various different options, print off reports where applicable, and just so you get a real feeling for the nuts and bolts of how this all works together. Equally, you don't have to use our dataset. If you have your own data available and your own export files or Compass export files that you can start off with, feel free to do that as well. Again, just follow the sequence of events to get the job set up within WellSeeker Pro. If at any point you become stuck, refer back to the video for a refresher on the details at each stage. That concludes this part of the training. This will be followed up by part 2 of the daily reporting training